Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the meeting of the Staffordshire Sustainability Board, our second meeting in public. Welcome to Cabinet members from the districts and also officers from the districts and county officers as well to this meeting. And what we will do first of all is just take apologies, if we could, Liam.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Wazir, Paul Farrer, David Smith, Martin Hamilton and Kay Buck, along with Paul Turner and Anna Miller.
Thank you. What I'm going to ask now is for the portfolio holders, who will be obviously representing their districts today and the county, myself, to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Cannock Chase District Council.
Is that right? Okay, that's fine. I'm not used to having all this modern technology. I'm Councillor Andrea Muckley from Cannock Chase. I am the portfolio holder for Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you. And then Lichfield.
Good afternoon, everybody. Cabinet Member for Waste Services, Ecology and Climate Change from Lichfield.
Newcastle Borough.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. David Hutchison, the Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Newcastle Underline Borough Council for the Sustainable Environment.
Thank you, David. South Staffs.
Thank you. I'm Kath Perry. I'm representing South Staffordshire District Council. I'm the Cabinet Member for Communities and Climate Change. Thank you.
Stafford Borough.
Ian Fordham, Cabinet Member Environment, excluding climate change.
So Tony Pearce, Cabinet Member for Climate Change, Nature Recovery, Sustainability.
Welcome. And then Staffordshire Moorland District Council.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm Nigel Yates and I'm Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change, Staffordshire Moorland District Council.
And the Vice Chair of the board today as well. Welcome. And I'm Councillor Simon Tagg, the County Council's portfolio for Environment, Infrastructure and Climate Change.
I should add that I'm also from Staffordshire Moorland's Cabinet Member for Services covering the waste portfolio.
Oh, okay. Welcome. We weren't aware of an extra portfolio holder covering this, but introduce yourself.
I would not dare to step on Nigel's toes because he's probably got bigger feet than me. Yeah. I'm just here really for the waste side of it. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome. I don't have any reps at the moment from Tamworth Borough Council or East Staffs Council, so they may join us. If not, we will move on. So this public meeting for us is really important that we do report back to the people of the county and in our districts and in our boroughs about the activity that we've been up to as a sustainability board. And obviously we've made a commitment to have these public meetings and report back on the progress we've made, not only against our base pledges, which we've all signed up to, but also on each individual district's actions over the last few months. And of course, this is the first meeting since the elections in May, which has led to a refresh of the membership of this sustainability board, and I'd like to welcome all of the new members to this public meeting, and I think it's really good to have a refreshed membership, and already we're working together and moving forward on this agenda, which encompasses every district, every town, every village across our county to ensure that we reach our goal of a sustainable Staffordshire, whether that's reaching net zero, whether that's bringing back nature and nature recovery. It's really important that we all work together on that. As I said at the beginning, we have set ourselves 10 base pledges, which we can report back on today. Pledge number 1 is baseline reporting, and I can confirm that all councils have prepared and published their annual baseline analysis of their organisation's carbon footprint. All councils have assessed and published progress in reduction of their carbon footprint, and they do that in October each year. And as we move forward, this is a really important indicator which we can measure ourselves against, and also measure ourselves within our districts, but also across on the county footprint. The second one is carbon literacy, a really good picture there that our councillors, our senior managers, our teams have been taking carbon literacy training so that we spread the message of the climate change agenda and sustainability throughout our organisations as councillors and as members of staff, that everybody is a climate change advocate within our authorities. And that's really pleasing that the districts and the county have progressed that as an important step. Part 3 of our base pledge is to be ambassadors, and I think by just sitting here in a public meeting, we're doing that. I think out in our communities, the portfolio holders, and also each member of every council is an ambassador for the agenda. We've all got our carbon reduction plans and our net zero targets, not all the same. Some are 2050, some are 2030, but we're all working in the same direction to achieve, reducing our carbon footprints to net zero and championing in our own areas and in our own wards that message of sustainability. 4 is the green travel planning. All councils have been supporting this one to bring forward plans for not only their employees but also their communities through the promotion of those green travel plans and policies for enable us to achieve that. And I think it's really important that we offer our staff as organisations a chance to get electric cars and also to travel share, and a really important step as people are coming back to the office, of course, post-COVID, and it's important that we encourage a green approach to travel. 5 is communications. We've got that later on our agenda, on a public agenda, is working together on a communications plan and behavioural change toward our vision for net zero. And I think that's really important that we've done that. And of course, a lot of people across the county would have seen such things as the carbon bubble in our towns, across the districts. And looking forward to the report back from Lily on that coming up later. 6 was the green energy. All councils are committed to procure 100% green energy supplies for their electricity as soon as existing contracts commit. And we made a step towards that, not only for the energy of our buildings, but also for our vehicles as well, which we could come on to later. 7 is energy reduction. By 2024, all councils will start to complete energy audits on operational buildings, and this will enable us to be able to see where we stand on energy reduction and make those steps we need to reach our net zero targets. 8 is that low carbon fleet I just talked about, and councils are moving forward on procuring different ways of low carbon ways of operating their fleet. That may be through HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil, that may be moving towards trials of electric vehicles. That's going on across the county in each district. Look forward to hearing about that from individual portfolio holders later. And then waste and recycling. We've all got our targets to increase waste and recycling. We know that there are confusing messages coming from government at the moment, but we here in Staffordshire have committed to developing our next waste strategy for Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent by 2025. And each of the districts and the county are working to minimise that waste, reuse that waste as well, as much as we can. And then 10 is innovation and technology, and explore new avenues to provide better ways of moving forward on this agenda. That includes working with our local businesses, because we're not just about our organisations, we're about the county as a whole, bringing the whole county to net zero by 2050. And that will be through such things as the Staffordshire Business Environment Business Network. That's also through the County Council's Jobs and Skills strategy as well, Green Jobs and Skills strategy, to enable us to get those jobs in the county that will help us to achieve our goal, and also bring new skills and also improve wages, because we know that jobs in the green industry are better paid than jobs in other sectors at this time. So that's just a brief run of the 10 base pledges. I think we've made good progress on those, but we're refreshing those today and moving them forward, because we need to keep the foot on the gas, so to speak, to enable us to achieve what we want to achieve over the next year. And we'll be talking more about our recommitment to those pledges and also our target areas later. But what I want to do now is I think I've said enough to introduce, is to move to each of the districts now and ask the portfolio holders, if present, if not, an officer from that authority, if present, will give that update. And we have a slide for each one in the pack, and starting with, first one is Newcastle Borough Council. I'll do them in the order they are on the presentation. So over to you, David from Newcastle.
Thank you, Chair. Right, the Newcastle Underline Borough Council report is in your pack. We have 6 points on the pack. Point number 1, the hydrogenated vegetable oil, or HVO, is now the default fuel in all our collection vehicles and most of the street scene vehicles. This represents a saving of 90% in vehicle emissions. Our carbon is broken down into 46% coming from vehicles and 54% coming from buildings. So if we bring 90% reduction to do with just the vehicles, this represents a 40% reduction in the council's carbon, which is a good figure. Option 2, our roadmap to net zero, is heading for sign-off at Cabinet on October the 17th. As the council project plan, we focus on reducing emissions from our building infrastructure. Again, as I said, 46% of our carbon is coming from vehicles and 54% from buildings. So 48% of the buildings actually comes from the J2 Leisure Centre. We've got a funding proposal in at the moment for pool covers for the J2 Leisure, which will reduce the buildings carbon down by 48% and reduce the carbon overall by another 26%. Our collection service was nominated as a finalist in the Association for Public Services Excellent Awards in the Best Service Team of the Year category. There were 300 submissions. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but we were runner-up. So to be runner-up in a field of 300 is pretty terrific, and I'm very proud of the team. Our food waste collection service is being extended now from the domestic properties. We're now doing nurseries and residential settings, and we're even doing some pilots in flats and independent living hubs. And those pilots have been going really well. We've looked at the handheld tools such as blowers and trimmers and chainsaws as part of the programme to move to battery-powered alternatives to petrol. And many of the implements that the street scene and the garden waste people do have already been changed from petrol to battery, and that's moving on really well. The final point on the update says we've now been doing successful trials leading to further plans and projects to update the range of land holdings the council is responsible for example, closed churchyards, parks and the woodlands. We've reviewed our mowing strategy, so we have some sections where we don't mow, therefore encouraging wildlife. We've brought in a management of trees, which has gone really well. We've also planted a public orchard and fruit bushes at the Keele Cemetery, and we've even got signage there telling the residents why we're doing what we're doing and what's happening, and what we hope to benefit from the fruit orchard and the fruit bushes at the cemetery. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And eagle-eyed ones amongst you have seen I was fast finger first. I'll be good on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I went forward by too many slides. So we'll go back to Cannock Chase Council. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Chair. We have tried to keep ourselves busy. So the team over at Cannock Chase have been doing lots of things. So we've supported local small to medium enterprises to get government funding to go digital and towards their net zero. Because as you were saying, Chair, it's not just us as a council. It's really important that we're sort of flag bearers for climate change and get change within the district as well. We had a wonderful thing called Small Change, Big Difference, which I attended. So we had people going to schools and they created short videos with the school children about climate change and about the small differences they could make. I'm told that they will be on YouTube at some stage, and if you only get a chance to watch one, I'd go Hensford Valley. It was beautiful, really gorgeous, but all of them were special in their own way, and obviously we're hoping that we can follow that up as time goes on. We have an eco-arch trail that's being installed at our Cannock Stadium, which is a great site if anybody's anywhere close, and especially if you've got children, an amazing park facility. And that's involved the Cannock Chase Cultural Educational Partnership. Up at Marquis Drive, so on Cannock Chase itself, we've got the Chase Creatures Trail, which has just started over the summer, which, for copyright reasons is definitely not Pokemon Go, but it's quite similar to Pokemon Go. So for the children and for adults, you can go around the site and you can collect these beautiful little chase creatures that have been designed by school children, and they'll tell you a little bit about the environment, about what you can do to protect your environment and the changes you can make. We've got a grant application that is being submitted to the Climate Action Fund for nurturing nature networks, which is easier said than than I thought. And that supports nature recovery, which obviously has a lot to do with the meeting that we had recently about nature recovery. We've launched the Food for Life initiative into 5 local primary schools. So they're looking at from farm to plate, which focuses on healthy eating. And it's really important because I think a lot of children, when you speak to them, don't know where the food on their plate is coming from. So I was speaking to the people from Just Oil a while back, and they were saying they were speaking to the children. They had no idea that crisps were made from potatoes. And, you know, these sort of things, it's so important that we understand where our food's coming from, because that's how we can look forward to make changes. And we've established a district-wide teachers network as part of the CCCEP legacy, which, again, is linked to the Nurturing Nature Networks. We are very committed to moving forward with any changes we can make towards our carbon footprint, really. Last, I just wanted to say hello to Zoe, who I worked with on the Zero Carbon Rugeley project, which was an incredible opportunity, and I'm hoping that we can work with Zoe on something here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. We'll be in from Zoe later. We now have East Staffs Borough Council. Is there any member or officer from East Staffs in the room? There isn't. So the slides are in the pack with an update from East Staffordshire Borough Council. We'll move on then to Lichfield District Council and Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. We brought a slide of pictures for you today. So working across from the top left, this is a really exciting initiative by a couple of our parishes in Lichfield District, Shenton and Stonnell, which is decarbonising heating. So they're working with South Staffs Water, using existing boreholes that they've got in the villages to find heat from. As a district council, we're involved in the fact that they've got government funding for this to do a feasibility study, 150,000, which we're sort of having. We're doing this the assurance bit for the government to make sure that the money goes in the right place. But really exciting with new housing developments coming on in both those areas. They may well be able to find a new way of heating those homes using water as opposed to using gas moving forward. The middle slide is we've just created a new council-wide climate officer group, environment group. This is on the back of our original carbon reduction action plan that was created some years ago. I think it's fair to say that we haven't, in the first couple of years that was created, we didn't sort of move at any great pace. So we've now got an officer group moving together in October so that we can make sure that we've got some targets that are achievable. That's going to come back to the wider member group just to see what those initiatives will do coming from the environment group. This is about trying to get all the workforce involved and owning part of it going forward. On the right-hand side there, the additional EV charging points. We've just designed, in the process of doing a new planning design code, whereby we're really enforcing upon developers when they're coming and building in our district that we do expect that these sort of things are second to nature that will happen on our new properties. But at the same time, our new development that's coming forward in Lichfield on the old Tempest Ford site will be our pledges to make sure that we've got enough EV charging points planned for across the whole of the district so that we can increase the amount of accessibility and be able to get people to utilise those charging points when they come into the district. Below that, where we talk about waste, of course, as you know, we have a joint waste service with Tamworth. We're already sourcing some new EV vehicles for our street scene operations going around the district. So this is another way of us being able to sort of reduce the amount of times that our larger vehicles are going out, diesel vehicles. So we're moving to the EV on the electric vehicles. We're doing some collection modelling around the scenario of food waste, as I'm sure a lot of authorities are, just seeing on what implication that has in relation to our rounds and whether or not we can go to less fortnightly, 3 weekly collections on certain areas as opposed to 2 weekly collections on some of the waste that we're collecting, and sort of a lot around sort of education of what goes in what bin, etc., which brings me nicely onto the final one, which is the one that we're really getting exciting about, which is our new recycling campaign, joint campaign with Tamworth that goes live at the end of this month. We're doing a big presentation to members. What we're trying to do, the campaign is primarily aimed at the younger generation, so it's going into schools with a lot of graphics on there, a lot of games for children to play. What we ideally want is for the children to get really on board with this and have a bit of peer pressure at home with their parents, etc., to sort of get some good practices in place. We also, frighteningly enough, want to get members involved more to sort of take this on in their communities and actually be community champions and work with local groups who are looking at doing much more recycling in that, as well as stuff like planting more hedgerows, looking at community gardens, all that sort of stuff. There's part of the sustainability bit, but equally we're working with our new recycling campaign. So we're hopefully going to get all our members up to speed and task them with going back into their communities and taking this forward and identifying areas where we can actually make some differences. And again, trying to increase our recycling rate to, you know, from where it is now up to a more acceptable rate going forward, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. Done Newcastle. Next up is South Staffordshire Council. Kath.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to give an update on the work of South Staffordshire Council on the issue of climate change and waste and recycling. We're continuing to engage with our own members here and we'll be discussing climate issues with them this week through an overview and scrutiny meeting. And also members working group, we've formed a members working group for climate change for this year as well as, and continuing. We're committed to helping our residents and also supporting the work of this group. We're currently looking at our own operational carbon footprint and understanding what these means for our own aspirations for net zero as a council. We have delivered carbon awareness training to members and to senior staff, and we'll be continuing this rollout in the next year for new members and our partners. We're working on our asset improvement strategy, which will see tangible energy savings delivered across our industrial estates. We're also working with our businesses networks to offer support and practical projects and deliver through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Year 4 of our garden waste service launched in May. We currently have over 30,000 active subscriptions. A number of new online web forms are being developed to improve our customers' experience by offering more self-service functions. Our recycling performance continues to be strong, with an estimated 50% recycling rate during Q1 of this year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Kath. Moving to Stafford Borough now. I think it's a double act between Ian and Anthony. Tony.
So I'll deal with the climate change aspect first. You can see the things that are listed there, but I want to mention a few other things that we're doing. First of all, we've got our new climate change officer, so Jake Stevens, who's sitting in front of me there, has just joined us. We're very glad to see him. We're looking into installing photovoltaic cells on our leisure centres, the one in Stafford and the one in Stone. And we're continuing with the installation of EV charging points, a number of car parks. A few other things. We've got a community climate panel, which is doing extremely well. One of them in particular is leading on food and farming and has generated a lot of interest in that. We're going to be applying to be awarded a bee-friendly borough, which of course means looking at a mowing protocol. I hope, since the county obviously deals with a lot of the mowing in the borough, that we're going to get cooperation on that. We're also looking at developing a solar panel scheme for residents and businesses by inviting installers to submit a bid, which we can then examine and sort out what is the best option. We've done this once before and we believe the time's right to do it again. Thank you.
I'll just pick up on the 6 bullet points on the right-hand side of the screen, talking about each briefly. The first is to confirm that none of the curbside waste collected in the borough is taken to landfill. Alongside the material recycled, we also collect garden waste converted to compost and soil improver, whilst residual waste is incinerated and converted to energy for residential homes. The second point is to report that officers calculate a 99.95% curbside collection rate, which is consistently reported, and that equates to some 4.2 million collections during the course of a year. The third bullet point is really a positive for engagement with younger people, as well as having a small benefit in its own right. And this is the partnership between the Borough Council and Veolia, leading to the planting free of charge of 40 fruit trees in schools. That project took place last year and is due to take place again this autumn. Moving on, this is a note really about community again, and that's our a partnership with Veolia leading to significant donations worth thousands of pounds a year, in fact, over a number of years, being made to food banks in the borough. The fifth point, we are carrying out targeted work to remove bins no longer required. This continues to take place because we realise that removing such bins reduces the environmental risk and allows our crews to complete the rounds more efficiently, as well as driving up recycling rates. And finally, there are targeted anti-contamination campaigns where we've witnessed any spikes in contamination. And we're working here closely with residents and housing associations to find the solutions to the particular local problem and to reduce the level of contamination. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Moving to Staffordshire County Council now. Pleased to introduce this slide on behalf of the County Council. I think we are moving forward on our plans for net zero by 2050. We'll be bringing an update of our action plan to November Cabinet here. But some of the highlights so far is we've adopted as all districts have, the Staffordshire adaptation strategy. We did that last week at our Cabinet. We've launched the fourth round of our Climate Change Action Fund. That's £1,500 to every county councillor in every division across the county. And I would urge people to check on the council's website, county council website for that, and please get in touch with your local county councillors also to enable that money to be spent on climate change adaptations, on other nature recovery issues as well. And it's a really good source of money for you. You can also join together with 2 county councillors or 3 to make it a bigger pot of money as well for a bigger scheme. So really worth advertising that again here. As the lead authority on the rollout of EV infrastructure, we're now a consortium member with 4 other local authorities with an allocation of £20 million for funding to begin to roll out that infrastructure across the county. It won't be the county council doing that itself. It will be enabling private business to do that, but we have that funding money to begin that task of rolling out electric vehicle charging points. We've converted our fleets to HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil, heavy fleet in house waste recycling and highways and library services. That's the same as what a lot of councils are doing now and across the county, and a really big saving there in carbon emissions on that, and also a cleaner fleet. But unfortunately, it's a bit more expensive, so we have to have more money in the budget to enable us to do that, and something we have to grapple with is the costs attached to this. And also, when it comes to building infrastructure, we're doing improvements to our existing buildings, and also when we bring forward plans for new buildings, such as potentially here in Stafford, they will be green developments, and they must be green developments now as we move forward towards our targets. And also on the sustainability side, we are as the County Council is the accountable body for the local nature recovery strategy, which covers Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent. And as that, I chaired a steering group, which I think many of the portfolio holders in the room were actually part of a couple of weeks ago. So we're moving forward on that over the next 18 months to put that local nature recovery strategy in place. Also, on the back of what Stafford said, new officers coming in, I'd like to welcome David Atkinson, who's our new Assistant Director for Connectivity and Sustainability, and he's sitting on my right there. If you'd just quickly like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name's David Atkinson. I'm the Assistant Director for Connectivity and Sustainability, and I look forward to working with you all from this point on.
So a key sort of connection into the County Council for districts and boroughs on the sustainability agenda. And I think the waste agenda as well. And moving to the right-hand side of the presentation there, and we've made great strides really in this year in our household waste recycling sites as we brought them in-house. And we moved to a van permit system, which will mean that priority is given to Staffordshire businesses and more importantly to Staffordshire residents. We've done a lot of upgrading to the sites, and if you've used any of these waste sites across the county, you will have noticed a difference right from the north right down to the south. This year we've sent 63,717 tonnes to our energy recovery facility, and only approximately 0.02% tonnes are being sent directly to landfill, which I think is a great achievement as well. And between January and August we've reused 150.747 tonnes of waste that would otherwise have been thrown away. So that's sort of getting the message of reuse as well is really important as well. And we successfully completed a food waste tender, making us ready for the future changes to the waste collections, which of course government will begin to demand that each authority in the county, that if they don't already, collects food waste. So we need the contracts in place, and we're working very closely with Newcastle Borough on that goal. So that's the update from the County Council. We'll move on to Staffordshire Moorlands. Over to you, Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just taking a headline at the top, reported carbon emissions reduced by 20% since 2019-2020. In some respects, that was driven by necessity with the COVID epidemic, and what it has done, it's allowed us to look at how to effectively integrate hybrid working into the new way forward, which has a significant impact on carbon reductions in offices and has a significant impact on the space which is required to do the functions which we've got. So we're undergoing a review of space and assets at this moment in time to see if we can further consolidate and maximise the use of less square metres with its commensurate carbon reduction. We have recruited a biodiversity officer who is actually a qualified environmental scientist who is starting in January, so that's a very positive thing, and we look forward to working with her. We are about to launch the plan for nature. It's gone through scrutiny, it's going to Cabinet and is planned to be adopted week commencing the 23rd of October, which fits in well with developing our green spaces strategy for parks, etc. We are very excited about the plan for nature. It's done in collaboration with the Staffordshire Wildlife Trust, and we see that as part of the fitting in with part of the nature recovery, obviously with it being a plan for nature, but also with the adaptation strategy. It allows us to plan our open spaces so that we can sort of future-proof, especially with regard to flash flooding and wild swings of weather. It allows us to look at various carbon sequestration techniques, and it also builds in with potential opportunities for sustainable transport, because one of the things which we have got a lot of in the north of the county is old disused mineral lines which are crying out for conversion into green cycle paths, and if those become green cycle paths, they also become biodiverse connectivity highways, which we are very, very keen to develop and explore. We launched the first round of the Eco Youth Workers. We've got a debate coming up in October, and again, we're very keen to support that because that's the next generation coming through. The generation don't need to be that generation of youngsters don't need to be lectured on climate change. We like them to come in to lecture us about climate change, which I think is the key message they need to put across. We're operating a community fund, and that has continuity to it this year. That is worth £20,000. £10,000 is put in directly by Staffordshire Moorlands, and £10,000 is put in by our waste collection service provider, who is AES. Grants are up to £500 each, and we've supported quite a wide range, including decarbonisation, LED light bulbs and things, through to bee-friendly establishments of insect hotels and everything in between. With regards to Eco4, just a reference, we have just started up a climate change working group for this current term. It's got more powers and more teeth. It's got full officer support, and it is charged with producing an annual report with recommendations direct to full council. So its work has to be taken seriously. And I've stepped aside from being in that so that it can operate with a degree of autonomy and operate with a degree of scrutiny. And as a general rule, speaking to the chair, there's two aspects of it, 2 hour meetings. The first hour is scrutiny, questioning of an outside service provider, an outside body. The second part is coming up with ideas and coming up with things which we can put in place with the council so we get that balance right. We are supporting a plethora through the various towns and villages which we have in the Moorlands Community Energy Days. We have a fixed stand there, and we work very closely with an organisation called Moorlands Climate Action, who do some absolutely superb work in the actual community, and we try and get them to spread that out to the wider Moorlands. We are just at the point of starting work on decarbonising one of the 3 large leisure centres to make it absolutely carbon neutral. It's a combination of air-sourced heat pumps and a small power station of solar panels, which will produce a neutral leisure centre. The investment there is around about £2.4 million, so it's a significant investment in pure green technology. Moving on to, we've talked about the asset plan. We have run a campaign about reducing contamination in recycling, because what we don't want is a load rejected just because somebody's done something slightly wrong. So we're doing a lot of work on community outreach and communication on there. And the final thing is, which you haven't actually been told yet, see, we've got to be subtle on how we tell them, but with regards to carbon literacy, we've made an executive decision that our planning committee and the climate change working group need to do the full hour climate literacy training course, so the fully versed and fully bridged up with the requirements moving forward of what we need to do with regards to climate change. I will hand over very slightly for a few comments to Charlotte Atkins, who has got the services portfolio, because we obviously been discussing aspects of recycling. Thank you.
Well, yes, I haven't got very much to add, Nigel, but obviously one of the issues around contamination, obviously we've had a leaflet drop about that, which hopefully will lead to a better result. We already have a high recycling rate, obviously, but there's always more to be done. We're going to be very much impacted by the waste transfer station being upgraded in Leek. That's going to have significant issues for us as a local authority, but we'll embrace those with enthusiasm, I think. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you, Nigel, for the exclusive for the Sustainability Board there of the whip being cracked in Moorlands for the Planning Committee and your Sustainable Climate Change Group. That's great. Moving on then to Tamworth Borough Council. Just do the call out. Is there anybody, officer or member from Tamworth? Nobody. So you can see the slides there. So I'd like to thank all the portfolio holders for their presentations. It shows the breadth of work that's going on across the districts and across the county as a whole, and that stands us in good stead as we look now to obviously update our pledges and renew our commitments. Just a reminder, there are the 10 pledges which I outlined earlier, and I did outline some of the updates in each of those, but there are key ones we just want to update, and the recommendations to us from our officer group and from Staffordshire CEO group are detailed there for us to look at. Is there any comments from members relating to those or those updates to the review of the base pledges? Okay, can we agree those then? That's the communications that we have another communications plan to take us through the next year and bring a board update in 2023. And I think that's a really good move because we've seen some really good positive things come out of the communications plan last year. And that one on energy reduction there, which I did detail earlier. The waste and recycling one is that we all support that new joint waste management strategy, and we crack ahead with that by 2025. And finally on that innovation and technology there, as you can see, as detailed there. So can we all agree?
A brief question, Chair, if I may, because I'm new to this group. Could you explain how the communication plan is put together and how it's funded?
Okay, I'm sort of getting ahead of ourselves because we're having a presentation next
Okay.
on the agenda from Lily,
I
which
will-
details that. But very quick answer is it's put together by an officer group of comms staff from across the county, borough and districts and the county. And also it's funded by each of the districts in the county as well on the programme which they put forward. But more of that will come later. Thank you. So I'm not seeing any dissenters from that, so we will agree that base pledge review, thank you. And just to point out some of the items that are going to be coming up over the next few months on the board, we are keeping an eye on local nature recovery strategy. Obviously, we're not the steering group for it, that sits separately, but that we're reporting into this group here continually to ensure we keep on top of that. We'll be monitoring our adaptation strategy as we move it forward. We'll also be ensuring the rollout of the electric vehicle charging strategy too. And we do have a number of things which are on our forward plan, such as hosting the Wildlife Trust for a training session for staff and members, creating a biodiversity roadmap and action plan, and also making district and boroughs making contact with the Climate Matters Staffordshire group as well, which is obviously a group which community groups feed into across the county as well. So a busy time, and we'll also be monitoring our performance against our base pledges moving forward as we go through into the autumn. And now that moves us to the next item on our agenda, which is the communications update from Lily. And I think you're going to do an evaluation of the carbon bubble, particularly which I talked about, but also some background to the comms plan that we've been engaged upon as a partnership, as a board over the last year. So over to Lily.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you for having me this afternoon. I'll just do a quick introduction. It's my first time presenting at the Staffordshire Sustainability Board. I'm Lily Saidi. I'm a campaigns officer for Staffordshire County Council, and over the last 2.5 years I've been working on campaigns directly to do with climate change across the county. I'm here today standing in for my colleague Rose Hampton, who most of you have probably met before. The last time she was here, she was sharing an overview of the communications plan from the first 5 months of the year, so January till May 2023. So today I'm just going to be doing a rundown of the communications activity that's taken place over the summer and talking about the success of the carbon bubble and a little bit of an evaluation. So next slide, please. So if you're new to the group or you haven't managed to see our carbon bubble events either in person or online, we have a short video here that should give you a little bit of a flavour of what the events was about and what people had to say to them. So hopefully the tech will work. Thank you. This huge carbon bubble behind me has made its way across Staffordshire, and it's been a unique way to get people to visualise what 1 tonne of carbon looks like.
It's huge. I didn't know there was that much carbon dioxide in a tonne.
Well, you can't miss it, that's a certain fact. It's getting the point across.
Seeing it visually puts it into perspective, doesn't it? Because you can talk about it, but seeing it like that, it's a bit like, wow.
Can you believe that the average UK household emits 12 tonnes of carbon each year? That's 12 of those huge bubbles. In Staffordshire, the whole county creates 5.8 million tonnes of carbon per year, and residential households are responsible for 23% of these emissions. These events have been a way to have positive conversations with residents about how we all have our part to play in reducing our carbon footprint. They've been hosted by all the district and borough councils in Staffordshire through the Sustainability Board. Our enthusiastic climate change teams from local councils have been popping those carbon myths and sharing some easy, sustainable tips. Switching to LED lights or lowering your thermostat down by 1 degree.
Using peat-free compost for gardening, definitely.
Take short showers. Buy locally a little bit more in terms of sort of British produce when we can.
It is about recycling things properly and not just throwing it in the bin.
The way we keep this event low carbon is by powering the inflation device on a generator which is run by HVO Green D Plus fuel.
It's a hydrogenated vegetable oil, 100% renewable, and it's 90% less carbon dioxide emissions.
So we're giving out these mini stress balls today, and what this represents is if you were to drive your car just 2 metres, this is the amount of carbon it would take. So just think about your commute to work and how much carbon that's going to emit from your car.
Surprised about how much we don't know about carbon capture, to be honest. I filled your forms in over there and I found out I know very little. There's still a lot I've got to learn. I think everybody here has got the same. We've all got to learn and we've all got to change.
You can't just wait for things to happen because it will only get worse. Even if it's something little, it still counts.
Together, let's make Staffordshire sustainable. Thank you. So hopefully from that video you can see that the events were really positive and we were able to spark a lot of interesting conversations with residents that we perhaps might not normally reach through our usual forms of communication. So the key achievements from the events, we were able to spark more than 1,000 direct conversations with residents, and it was a really great talking point and an opportunity to educate people about their carbon footprint who perhaps didn't actually know what carbon footprint was, or they didn't know what areas of their life they were emitting it from, and also inspiring them to make even just one small change in their life. And following on from these conversations, we were handing out leaflets with information on and also encouraging people to calculate their own carbon footprint. And off the back of that, we had over 350 people go home and work out their carbon footprint online, which I think is a really positive step in for people to start in their journey on hopefully being a little bit more sustainable, because it's that education and that starting point of even knowing what to do and where your carbon footprint comes from. So also at the event, we were asking people to complete our climate change consultation, and overall this received 3,407 responses. And this was a really good result for us. It was in the top 3 consultations that the council has done, falling just behind the COVID survey and the library survey. So we're really pleased with that, and we've got some really good feedback. Next slide. Obviously, with it being a massive carbon bubble, orange in the street, it received quite a bit of press coverage. So 40 mentions of the carbon bubble in news and media outlets, and releases reached over 2.7 million people. 37 of those releases had a positive sentiment, with 3 of them being neutral. So from that, you can see that the media coverage was really positive, which I think is great. And there's just a breakdown of it being 52% newspaper, 48% online. Next slide is just some examples of the press cuttings. So from Lichfield Live, Moorlands Radio, Churn It Sound and Express and Star. Next slide. So obviously we use social media. Most people are on it. This is many of the ways we get our communications out there. So overall, we shared 21 posts about the carbon bubble, reaching 11,500 people online, and the content having over 207 likes. And we will be sharing that video now on social media as well, so hopefully we'll get some positive feedback from that too. Next slide, and some social media snippets as well. I think if you click on that phone, that is a little TikTok video. It's okay if it doesn't play, but is it not working? No, that's fine. That's just one of the social media pieces that we put out. But if you go on our channels, you'll be able to look just similar to the video, but just a little bit more casual. Residents talking about how they weren't aware that everything we do has a carbon footprint, and really impressed by the bubble basically itself. So if you have a trawl on the council social media, you'll be able to find some of the stuff there. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, throughout the carbon bubble events, we were promoting the climate change consultation. And basically this consultation was asking residents what their opinions were of climate change, their attitudes towards it, and also what their barriers were to becoming greener. The consultation ran from the 25th of May till the 1st of September. So it has just closed. We are still analysing the full results, but I'm going to share a short overview with you today. So next slide. So from the results, we've established that we have high levels of awareness. So most of the respondents saying they know a lot about climate change or a little bit. So that kind of shows that most people taking the survey knew something about climate change, and many of them were concerned about it, 2/3 reporting that they were worried about it. Next slide. And really positively, most of these people were already taking action. So 9 out of 10 people said they were already doing their bit to reduce their impact on the environment. And the top actions that we received were either making their homes energy efficient, recycling, buying eco-friendly products, and not surprisingly, the biggest barrier that we've picked up on was cost, which was cited by over 6 in 10 participants. But we are still going through the data and get a bit more of an in-depth analysis, but those are the overarching themes. Next slide. An interesting part is that most people thought, 2/3 of people thought that everyone plays a part in reducing their footprint, which I thought was really interesting. So it kind of means that we can kind of back our communications and encouraging people that we can all make a difference. It's not just one part. And also we receive responses from all areas of the county, which I think is really important to get a rounded review of people's attitudes, not just in one area. And 44% of residents from the survey said they would like to receive communication about climate change from the council, which is quite positive, seeing us maybe as a bit of a trusted voice. And then next slide. So finally, just to finish off, the next steps that we have. So we're currently undertaking analysis of the consultation results and exploring any other interesting variations in opinion or any other recurring themes. We will be producing a summary analysis and written report of the findings. And at the next SSB meeting, we will discuss these findings and agree actions in response to the feedback. And then we'll communicate these findings on our website and with the public. And then, as Simon said earlier, we will bring communications proposals to the next SSB meeting in November 2023. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lily, for a brilliant presentation. The video was brilliant too, I think. It really shows the potential and the impact of the carbon bubble. And it did its roadshow, but of course I think one had to be cancelled because of high winds. We had storm something or other, didn't we,
Yeah, I think it was maybe set up and then it got cancelled just from a health and safety perspective. But I'm quite impressed with, English weather that only one of them didn't go ahead properly. So, yeah.
We don't want to bouncing down the high street and taking out shops and stores, do we?
Simon, just to say, sorry, Chairman, it was just to say it was South Staff's.
So I think as we move forward, possibly the integration of that project going forward, and so more and more people can see it. I saw it in Newcastle Town Centre, which was one of the things, the first one that we did in Newcastle Town Centre. Then at Stafford show, at the Stafford Showground, which was really good, and I think it really had the impact. And as you can see, we started our survey off at those events, and it's really pleased that we had that. Over 3,000 people come back on the survey, and it'd be really interesting to see the full analysis and bring that back to this board in the future. And also, when I was at the Staffordshire Expo, Climate Expo on Friday, people were interested to see if they could see the data and output from that would help them and organisations who are based in the county to see what people think about climate change. And it's interesting to see that they think, cost. People are thinking cost is an issue, which we know is really high on people's agenda in many ways. But obviously, the results of adaptations and changes to properties and etc. will help to bring down energy bills as well. So there's the plus side of the investment brings the payoff probably over a longer term. But opening it up now to questions and comments on this plan. We got Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we had it in Beacon Park in Lichfield as part of one of our activity days, and interestingly enough, the children thought it was a big inflatable bouncy castle that they could actually go in and play in. But no, it was certainly a big talking point and raised a lot of interest, and particularly with the younger generation who were astounded by the actual amount of carbon that, as a family, they were using on a daily basis. So, yeah, really, we'd like to have it back at some stage if possible. Thank you.
Nigel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just worried for a minute you were going to say it was Hurricane Nigel, but I've nothing to do with it, so that's fine. That didn't stop it. Yes, one of the things which is very interesting to me is that the top action which you've got is making homes more energy efficient. And I'd just like to reference a presentation which Broadoak did, who were the Staffordshire County Council's nominated provider on a couple of the grants. And it was an eye-opener to councillors. Now, councillors are supposed to have the ear to the ground, so to speak, but to have that presentation in front to say what the different categories of grants, what the different qualifying criteria are, was an absolute eye-opener. I think individually people were aware of them, but to have it brought together on one page, so that just stresses the importance of communication and getting that communication through to residents. It also stresses the importance of the council's role, and that's the borough councils, district councils, as well as the county council, because you've touched on the fact that the council is a trusted voice. And I think in some respects, when a lot of these initiatives and a lot of these potential grants came out, especially with reference to Trustmark-only companies, Trustmark's fine if you're in the centre of Manchester, Trustmark's fine if you're in the centre of London, but once you get into the more rural environment, Trustmark companies are very few and far between. So I think somehow we've got to try and bridge that gap using our reputation collectively as a trusted service to make sure that we can identify where we can maximise the opportunity for our residents to take up these grants, but also get the message across in a manner which encourages take-up and participation, because we can't apply for the grant for them, so to speak. We can lead and we can show, we can demonstrate that trusted status, and I think that's fundamentally important, because if anybody goes onto social media, which to a greater or lesser extent we all do, when you look at anything which comes up with free boiler upgrade, free solar panels, this, that and the other, there's an inertia and reluctance to click on that, because straight away it's data collection and straight away it's the pestering which comes of it. So we've got an absolutely massive role to play in communication to get that 23% carbon footprint down, which has a direct impact in the cost of living. It has a direct impact on the quality of life for our residents, and that's where we can work.
Thank you, Nigel. Good point. And then Andrea.
Thank you very much. Actually, when it came to Cannock Chase, it was up for less than an hour because of high winds, and we were wondering, is there any chance of us having it again for free? Because even when it wasn't up by the time the festival started, and then it was down within an hour, and within half an hour after that, the whole thing had been taken away. The people had gone. There was no conversations. And it was a real shame. It was a real missed opportunity. So that's my first point. But
no, it is unfortunate. I think it's one of those things that with the weather we can't control, and I think there are some quite big costs of running these events. However, I feel next year I think we are planning on doing either something similar to the carbon bubble or bigger and better. So I will definitely take that into account and feedback that to our team.
Thank you, because I'm aware that the hope is that in the future that districts and boroughs would pay to use it again, but obviously we've not really had the opportunity to use it for free yet, so it would be lovely if we could, because we've got quite a lot of events coming up. For example, next March we've got this Great Imaginings event coming up at the Leisure Centre, where we're going to be talking about climate change and things. We could even have it indoors within potentially within the sports hall, which would stop us worrying about the weather. So, we've got that opportunity potentially.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And I think as part of putting together that next version of the comms plan, I think there'll be staffs that will be looking to try and see if they can have a rerun with nicer weather as well. So I think something to take away. And of course, we've got recommendations, well, not recommendations, but things to us to note there and endorse, is that we obviously undertake the analysis of the consultation results, exploring any interesting variations in opinion, produce a summary analysis and a written report of the findings, which would be good to come back to this board, would be brilliant. And as it says there, discuss the findings with this board and agree some actions in response to the feedback, and then communicate the findings upon our website. And then also to bring that communications plan proposal to the November meeting of this board. And I think Lily has taken away the people wanting more carbon bubble, so we'll see what we can do about that. But that's brilliant. Thank you, Lily, for that. And I think some really exciting proposals will be coming in November. When we look back, we can see some an exciting programme of events related to climate change and sustainability that I think have made people more aware of the issues within the county, and that's what we intended to do when we started the joint comms plan last year. Right, we'll move then to item 4 on the agenda, which is the Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent Climate Commission. And this is a discussion after previous discussions we've had in this board over the last year or so. But I'm going to ask Zoe just to do a little brief introduction and update on where we are with the Climate Commission. And then we'll have a discussion about, as you'll see in the report, the recommendation that we sign up as a partnership board, Staff Sustainability Board, to the Climate Commission. Zoe, thank you for coming, and over to you.
Super. Thank you very much for the invitation from the Commission to come and speak to you as a bit of an update, and just to say, I think it's really great to see this board existing and to hear about all of the progress. Also to say apologies from Julian Wolford, CEO of the Staffordshire Wildlife Trust, who co-chairs the Commission alongside myself. He has a clashing board meeting. So a quick introduction of where the Commission came from. End of 2021, there was an event run at Keele, a panel discussion, lots of different sectors represented, and there was a real feeling at the end of that we needed to keep those discussions going. It very much felt at the time that all heads turned to me, or Keele, as effectively a sort of an honest broker to really try and convene that space. We met as a group after that, and really sort of came to the conclusion that we needed to try and formalise as a commission, a climate commission, and there were a number that have been formed across the country at different scales across over the past few years. So we've spent a lot of time writing terms of reference for the Commission, and are at a stage where we have organisations who are signing up to the Commission's terms of reference. So we are a legal entity. One thing to really emphasise, although the official name is Climate Commission, it is really a Climate and Nature Commission. So it is about bringing together, those deeply interlinked and integrated issues of climate change and nature recovery. And the overall aim is to help accelerate action on climate change and nature recovery through cross-sector collaboration. Over the time that we've been going, there's been a number of wins for the Commission, which really demonstrate the value of bringing these different sectors together. The Commission played a role as part of the narrative for funding that we brought successfully in, which is leading to a further application looking at green skills. And again, it's actually just showing that the narrative of having this sort of structure is something which is falling well with funding applications. We're seeing development in people's thinking as one of the things that we're running twice every quarter, if that makes sense, is knowledge exchange events. And that's bringing together the expertise that we have in the county from different organisations, and giving that space for people to share that knowledge with our partner organisations. So our current structure is that we meet as a commission quarterly in terms of business updates, and then in between that we have these knowledge exchange events. We are going to be hosting a strategy workshop, an all-day workshop on the 19th of October, really to try and bring as many different voices together to help us set our strategy for the next step of the Commission. And then another thing that we have planned will be in the spring, an event which will allow lots of different stakeholders across the county to really sort of go, these are the sorts of problems and challenges that we're having, and trying to match that with actually our educational sector, our colleges, our universities within the county, to say, well, actually, can we use some of those resources to help some of these different challenges around climate action and nature recovery? So really, what's next? We do have this workshop coming up, and we really want to, as a commission, to be driven by the needs of those the bodies, the organisations who are engaging with us, and that continues to grow. I have a question that I would like to also sort of get people's to reflect on is, what can the Commission do that the Sustainability Board and individuals can't do, and hear about where people see the role of the Commission. And just to say, I'd be delighted to pick up any conversations with individual districts and boroughs as well about the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. And could I thank you for the role you've played so far in the Climate Commission, I think, as on behalf of Keele, but also you're an advocate, as we know, for this agenda, and you've put in some real hard work to try and get it to this stage. And I've been involved, because Zoe asked me to be involved right at the beginning, with my county council hat on. But as we've developed the Sustainability Board, it seemed to be quite sensible that the two bodies should move together, move together in the same direction. But of course, the Climate Commission is a whole different animal than the Sustainability Board, because it contains people from across sectors, as Zoe said, businesses, the health sector, voluntary sector. And I think as a board, we need to really be around that table. So I think that one of the recommendations we've got there is that we do join the Commission as a Staffordshire Sustainability Board, but that does not preclude districts and boroughs or the county having a relationship with the Climate Commission on many levels, which I think we will do as it gains pace. And I think it's something which, again, it's taken a while to get to this stage, hasn't it? But I'm really interested in this sort of workshop that you're going to hold, which will really sort of solidify what we want from the Climate Commission. And I'd like to see, that the Staffordshire Sustainability Board is around that table at that time on behalf of the borough and districts and the county to move this agenda forward. And Climate Commissions have been successful in other areas. Bristol, Yorkshire and Humber area have a Climate Commission. And I think if we can have one in Staffordshire, it will be that cross-sector, everybody working together and everybody feeding in, everybody then taking away actions. We'd bring them back here to SSB, which then would feed through to our cabinets and our leaders in the districts and boroughs and the county, whereas the other sector leaders would take it back to their, whether it's universities, whether it's the health sector, and so on. So I think it makes a really good sense to have this and for us to be a part of this. But I'll open it up to comments from members of the board at the moment. I'll bring in Nigel first.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and very pleased to see this report, very pleased to read the content. So there's two key words which I want to pick up on, and one is integration. I do like to see the strong links between nature recovery, the Plan for Nature, and climate change. I don't see them as separate hands, so to speak. I see them very, very much interlocked. There's work which we can do on leisure activities which fits well with nature recovery. I mean, I touched on one earlier on, which is a perfect example, and that is if we've got a cycle path, and that cycle path can become a green network. That green network can be planned properly to enhance nature recovery. And I think what we've got to do is to maximise the effort and value for every pound which we've got by making sure it ticks as many boxes as it has. And that's not just an exercise, that actually can show positive results on the ground. Not just the cycle networks, but the canal networks as well. Primarily they are a waterway for craft, whether that be industrial usage or whether that be pleasure crafts. But the reality of it is they cross borders, they cross fields, they connect the rural area with the urban area, and they can become a super green highway. So that integration is extremely important. The other thing which to me is important as well, and it sums up by looking at the commonality, but also the differences between the reports which we started off from the districts and the borough, and the word is collaboration. One thing which this commission can do, and one thing which the Staffordshire Sustainability Board can do, is that by bringing people together with slightly different emphases and slightly different directions, you can actually showcase best practice, and you can showcase what works, and you can motivate us to say, actually, this is what they've been doing in Litchfield. Why can't we do that in Staffordshire Moorlands or Newcastle Borough or whatever? So having that collaborative working gives an economy of output as well, which is fundamentally important. So yeah, very pleased to receive it. Thank you.
Anthony, Stafford.
Thank you. Two questions. You mentioned working with districts, or working with districts has been mentioned. So how far up the agenda is that? Is that something you positively want to do? And secondly, a question that I raised at the conference the other day, which is that, you know, we do have this board, we've got the Nature Recovery Strategy Board, and there are other organisations across Staffordshire. So how do we ensure that we're all making the best use of our time in those discussions? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for those questions, and I've had a good few days to think about that last question as well. So on the first question around districts, you know, we would very much you know, welcome the direct involvement of districts into the Commission. They are sort of conversations, to be fair, that we probably would have liked to have picked up during the summer, you know, so I'm really happy, either myself, Julian, or anyone else in the leadership group, to have a conversation, or even just drop me an email, and we can, you know, send you information, send you links to the next sort of meeting. So it's a very, very genuine desire to engage direct with the boroughs and districts, as well as the county level, to ensure that link in with this board. Yeah, you know, there's lots of networks. You know, I would say this network arose because there was a real feeling of a need to have that cross-sector working. And, you know, there are a number of different networks that are operational at different levels, or at different sort of, with a different sort of focus. So Climate Matters, Staffordshire, you know, great network, more community group focus, but they feed into the Climate Commission. There's also a lot of sort of county-wide sort of initiative, county-wide activity that a county-wide climate commission can help sort of feed into. But I certainly wouldn't see that the Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent Climate Commission as preventing more local cross-sector working as well. My own view of sort of the change that we need to just develop these webs which allow us to understand these different perspectives. And a big part of what we're also trying to do is create, you might have heard, those that are there on Friday, this term structured serendipity, where you create the space for people who wouldn't normally speak together to go, oh, actually, we can connect on that. And we've seen some of that through the Commission already, through some of the conversations that have had, that there wasn't another space where that would happen. Then just pick up on the nature piece, and we do think it's really important to join that climate and nature. And I feel I should say something a bit more about this because Julian isn't here. And that's really, you know, there are lots of different ways between where the nature and the climate piece intersect, and that also includes thinking about adaptation in terms of nature and flood defences, but also obviously the role of you know, restoring our natural environments in terms of removing carbon emissions as well. And you know, when we're talking about sort of nature, we're not just talking about the green stuff and the fluffy stuff. It's also sort of whole natural capital and soils and air and water as well.
Thank you. And I think the Commission is about that additionality it can bring as well, isn't it? For example, we as a Sustainability Board, our main interest is ensuring our authorities get to net zero by working together and sharing knowledge and et cetera on waste side, on sustainability, on climate change. But we also know as a individual councils, as councillors and as a board, that we've obviously got to look towards the whole of Staffordshire and bringing that to net zero by 2050 as well. And that will require working with all of the different partners. So I think that sort of, and the Climate Commission offers that sort of structure, I think, which will enable us to do that. I'm going to bring in Charlotte and then Andrea.
Thank you, Chair. I just really want to ask about your collaboration with social housing providers, simply because we do have notoriously most leaky properties almost in the country, but also in terms of maybe the lessons learned for the private rented sector as well, where we're most likely to have the most deprived community in terms of both those housing sectors.
Thank you. Mine was just a comment, really, that what I found when I first became a councillor was that people are very internally and quite insular, and what I have seen at Cannock and hopefully at other places is councillors more able to interact with one another, and that's on a district level, you know, seeing people as a human being and actually finding a little bit out about them. And the beauty of that is we all have our own background, we all have our own life experiences. So when you've got things like the Climate Commission, like the Sustainability Board, we're all coming from a different angle, but we're all learning from one another rather than just trying to learn by yourself. So even today, just listening to ideas from other council, I've thought, oh, maybe we could do that at Cannock and things. So, you know, I think it's a great opportunity to, you know, many hands make light work, as they say. And also, you might come into contact with people that you never would have done before, but they've got the answer to your problem. And I think especially bringing in sort of academia as well. You can say, I've got this problem, and then sort of academics can look at it and think, actually, there is a way that we can find out more about how to sort this out, or even just get it sorted. So I think, you know, we can't do it alone as politicians in our little district councils. We have to work with other people. And as you were saying, it's a great way to pool resources as well. There's no point us paying to do something and then finding out that Newcastle have paid to do it, but they've paid to do it cheaper and more efficiently. You know, we need to exchange that knowledge to make sure we're doing the right thing and that we're using our resources appropriately.
I think a visible possibly of that is where we're working together with the Climate Commission on a possible carbon tool. Our county staff have been speaking to the Commission and the Globe Foundation about a carbon tool that we could use across the board. Everybody's using the standard one to measure how then businesses can use it. The other sectors in the county can use it as well. So that's a practical way. But over to you to sum up as well, and then we'll move to a decision. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, and I think you've explained some of the benefits very articulately there on my behalf. Thank you, Andrea. And just to come back to the social housing question, we do have both Aspire and Trent and Dove, who are very engaged organisations in the social housing sector involved in the Commission. You know, I think to be honest, we have a way to go in terms of having a footprint in the more southerly parts of the county, which we're keen to do. And what the conversations I've had with the social housing sector sort of representatives is they can sort of see the Commission as a vehicle where they all start to work together, and they might just have one social housing representative in the end who sort of engages directly with the Commission. So I think there's a potential to develop in those sorts of ways as well. So, you know, thank you all very much for your time, and very happy to pick up any conversations with individuals following today. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. And I think that spreading the footprint of the Commission into the south of the county is really important. I think through this, if we make this decision today for the SSB to sign up to this, and also your conversations with the districts and boroughs, will hopefully lead to that sort of flow out to the south of the county. So we've got a recommendation that the board agrees to join the Commission as a collective of local authorities, and that the SSB chair and vice chair be representative. That's got to be sorted out, whether we're going to be commissioners and alternates and stuff like that, isn't there? There's a way to sort that out, but I'm sure we can work that out with the Climate Commission. But does everybody agree? I haven't seen anybody speaking against, so that's brilliant. Thank you. We'll then move back to our agenda, and we're now on to item 5, which is the food waste service, the journey so far, which is going to be a presentation from Andrew Bird from Newcastle, assisted by Tim Cooper from the County Council. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Okay.
I will indeed. Okay. So, yeah, if you just press the next one, Chair, please. That's wonderful, thank you. So I think it's probably just worth taking a bit of a step backwards for those of us that have been here for donkey's years, like myself, and where the original joint waste management strategy came that we obviously talked about earlier in terms of needing now to renew it. We had a vision at that time of effectively zero waste to landfill, which we've demonstrated, we've achieved. And, you know, the picture there I took many years ago of the landfill in Cannock. We want to move away from that, and I think particularly those of us in Newcastle have had quite enough of landfills, to be perfectly honest. So I think, you know, that strategy was absolutely right at the time. But now we're sort of moving on from that. So next slide, please, Chair. So effectively, I think the way clearly things are moving nationally and the way we want to move, I would suggest, is that we need to certainly move away from the word waste. That waste obviously needs to be treated as a valuable resource and not a problem. And what I'm hopefully going to demonstrate in this presentation, that actually food waste, yes, it's a bad thing in terms of the fact that we waste so much food, but actually it becomes a valuable resource in terms of helping us, certainly in terms of climate change, but getting away from landfill and indeed energy from waste. So it needs to be dealt with effectively, sustainably and economically, which obviously maximises its value. Next slide, please, Chair. So just to give you some background in terms of Newcastle itself. So we are the only authority still in Staffordshire to collect food waste completely separately. But how did we come to do that? Well, that journey started before my time with Newcastle, to be fair. But I think it was at the time Newcastle probably had the poorest recycling and composting performance in Staffordshire. Around about 2008, it was only at 26%. And it was at the time when everybody was moving towards alternate weekly collections for residual waste, and you know what a difficult decision that was at the time. And now we see authorities moving to 3 and 4 weekly. So obviously politically it was not acceptable to do that on its own, and that's where effectively separate food waste came into the scope, and it was a rare thing at the time, but it was proposed as part of the changes. So for Newcastle, it was a really innovative step to make, and also the authority wanted to maximise the value of everything it was collecting by, you know, increasing quality as well. So the service, as it's evolved, now we operate 6 collection vehicles with a driver plus 1. We collect food waste separately to households on a weekly basis. We currently collect around about 3,000 tonnes of food waste a year, which represents around about 6% on our recycling and composting performance. And the service currently costs us about £334,600 a year gross to operate. So we've very much taken that on board and done that for a number of years. So how did we manage it? So if we go back to 2010, when the council brought its new strategy in, there were no sort of local anaerobic digestion operators at the time, plenty in the pipeline. But we went out to tender regardless and actually got a good response. And Lower Rural Bioenergy were the preferred bidder. However, they didn't have a facility. They had planning permission but no facility, and they were a new company in the industry. However, they were a farming family looking to diversify, so really good story there. They actually had the technical ability to do it, and they had a sustainable business plan. They just needed a contract to get things going. So it was a classic situation of chicken and egg.
And to be fair to Newcastle, we took the brave decision to actually award them a contract without there being a facility to take the material to. And thankfully, they were good to their word and had the facility up and running in time to start in 2010 when the first collection started. We can move on, Chair. We extended that contract effectively as far as we could, and then in 2016 we had to go out again. We again got a very good response from the industry, but things had clearly moved on just in that short period of time. And at that point we got even better results on gate fees. So it was a 0 gate fee, so we didn't have to pay anything. We just had to pay for the haulage of the material from our transfer station down to Cannock. So the contract was awarded to Biffa at their Poplars facility in Cannock, and the contract was to 2020, but the potential to extend, which we took up to August of this year. And again, we've processed around about 21,000 tonnes of food waste under this contract. So it worked really well for us. But as you can see, this is demonstrating that in a short period of time, that industry is changing. And where we were having to pay to have the material treated, by 2016, it was effectively going in free. And I'll come on to where we're at now. So in 2022, we decided with the County Council to undertake a joint procurement to offer effectively a Staffordshire-wide solution using Newcastle's tonnage as a base. If we move on, Chair, thank you. So that joint procurement was led by the County Council as the Waste Disposal Authority. Again, we got a really good response from industry to the procurement process. And an even better result on gate fees. We're now into a situation where we're getting income for it. So we're actually getting paid for the food waste that we're collecting, which in Newcastle's perspective will mean we're about £80,000 a year better off than we were with the previous contractor. The contract was awarded to a company called Biotech 4 at their Telford facility. And the contract, sorry, there's a slight typo there, is actually 2027 with a potential to extend. For us, this contract is a game changer. The focus now is to really increase and maximise on food waste collection, so we want to get all the food waste we possibly can out of the residual waste. And we want to also start to look at commercial collections to operate alongside our existing household and schools collections. And again, as Councillor Hutchinson pointed out earlier, we're looking to roll out into flats. We've got a couple of pilots on at the moment. But we're not going to do this until we've got confirmation of consistency in collections as part of the government's resource and waste strategy because of new burdens funding. So there's a little bit of a question mark there at the moment. And now, Chair, if this works, we'll show, we can show you the digestion process. I have actually got some Okay, thank you. Councillor Hutchins is just handing out some paper copies of the same, so you can see the process. It's interesting, and again, you can see how the industry is developing. So certainly in the early days of anaerobic digestion, and certainly our first two contractors were focused around electricity generation. But you might have picked up in the film that you've just seen that actually Biotech 4 actually, as well as producing electricity, actually are putting biogas into the grid. So that is a significant move forward. So you've effectively got renewable gas going into grid. And I've always said there's no such thing as green gas, and indeed there probably isn't. But this is probably as near as you can get to it. So you know the world is evolving in this direction, which is a good thing. I think it's probably prudent to say at this point as well that food waste is not good in terms of the sheer amount that we do throw away, or that is thrown away before we even get it as consumers. And one of the things I think we've focused on in Newcastle is that actually by separating it out of your waste stream is that actually residents start to see how much they're wasting and therefore amend their behaviours accordingly. And I think we've seen that. So, albeit that I've said we want to push to get more food waste, it is to get more food waste out of the residual waste bin. We actually ultimately want people to waste less. So I just need to make that clear. So where are we now? So currently, our 2022-23 recycling and composting rate was 47%. It's worth just noting we charge for garden waste collections. 6%, as I said before, relates to separate food waste, around about 3,000 tonnes a year. Participation is 35%. Now, we now measure this quarterly. It's one of our corporate priorities. It needs to increase, and this is probably one of the real challenges for us. 35% is not great if we look at that with other materials and waste streams that we actually collect. So, residual waste, let's be honest, is going to be 99.95, 100%. Dry recycling will be getting towards those levels as well. So we need to do a huge amount of work. I don't think just as a council, but actually maybe as food waste gets rolled out across Staffordshire, but also nationally, to get that material up. So the key to that is clearly around good, well-designed and targeted communication. And for us, we took the decision a number of years ago to offer free liners to people. I know there's two schools of thought as to whether that's a good idea or not, but I think, I'll be quite honest, I think if we didn't do that, that actually we wouldn't get the participation that we've got at the moment. So it's, we found it to be a valuable lesson. Next slide, please. So challenges, I think, wider than obviously ourselves at Newcastle. Obviously, the resource and waste strategy is going to change depending on how it now moves forward, but potentially will change what we do and what we collect. In 2019, when we were starting to look at the refresh of the strategy, actually Keele University undertook residual waste analysis for us across the whole of Staffordshire, which I think was a challenging project for the university, but actually we got some really good data out of that, and it showed that actually an average across all the districts was about 30% of the residual waste contained food, which again sort of marries with the national picture. Interestingly, Newcastle's was about 19 to 20%, so it was clearly less, which is what you would hope, but there was still a significant amount of food waste in there. So, with that, in terms of Newcastle, as I say, we need to increase participation. Again, will new burdens funding be provided for separate food waste collections in England? It was stated that it would be, but who knows now? I think there's a big question mark over that. Procurement for vehicles and food caddies is going to be an issue moving forward if all English authorities have to collect food waste separately. The requirement, as I say, we have 6 vehicles. You times that against the sort of 9 collection authorities across the board, and you times that then by X hundred local authorities, that becomes a significant issue in terms of production of those vehicles and indeed the food caddies. So the government's intention to get this off the ground by 2025 is probably somewhat optimistic. And again, as we're into a supply and demand situation, so what the future trends for gate fees in anaerobic digestion will be is anybody's guess. As I say, at the moment, we're in a situation where we're getting income, but there's plenty of capacity. So it is a supply and demand led market, and as that food waste increases, unless the number of AD plants increases, and again, they are not easy to get off the ground. You know, you can't just build one in a few months and have it operational. That could start to alter the sort of gate fees that we see as well. And as I say, we need to make sure that we've got the right infrastructure in the right location. So we don't want to be moving this material over huge distances, and that's why transfer stations are going to be vital. I'll hand over to Tim now to talk about the County Council's preparations on that regard.
Thanks, Andrew. I think it's probably important to start off, as Andrew's sort of led me quite nicely there. When we started this procurement exercise probably about a year ago, we didn't think we had that much certainty, and we were still trying to work out. We thought at this stage we would have more certainty as to what was coming. I think it probably, I don't know how we've managed it, but we've got probably less certainty than when we started. So I'm quite pleased we've got this in place because it does give us a safety net. As Andrew says, the resource and waste strategy is still pretty unclear. There was good indication that food waste would become mandatory. Whether or not that's the case now, we're not. We're still sort of working through that and trying to understand what is it that the future waste will look like. But as the county acting as a waste disposal authority, we wanted to ensure we've got our treatment route available. There was, as Andrew's pointed out, there were potential bottlenecks. A lot of people clamouring for capacity into these plants. So we wanted to make sure we'd got some space earmarked into those plants, some capacity should we need to. And 6 of the WCAs, already, their food waste goes through a county facility at W2R or Hamford. So we wanted to know that when we did move to separate, we've got those routes in place. And that's where we are, and that's why we put this contract together, working with Newcastle as the base tonnage. Next slide. On the slide there, you can see the tender produced for our lot 4 different off-takers. We have one over in Averstone, one at Cannock, and the one that Andrew's referring to, that he's sending his material to. And then we have one down in Northampton, which is probably one we're not going to use, but it's useful to have it on there. We do have transfer stations, and food waste does go through some of our transfer stations. And so it's useful to be there to have it. If capacity at those other facilities we do start struggling, or we can via direct waste to that through one of our transfer stations, but it wouldn't be something we'd be sending any district and borough to. That's not our intention. We've got the 1, 2 and 3. They would be the ones we'd be looking to go to. Obviously, you can see where they're located. They are all round in the south, but obviously Newcastle has already have their contract in place now, and that's operating. And for Moorlands, we've got Leek Transfer Station, which takes food and green waste as it is at the moment, and there'd be no view to change that going forward. So overall, I think we got quite a good spread, and was quite happy with those off-takers. So if we go to the next slide. So this was my team who worked on the tender, was just working through trying to understand of those off-takers, where would the district and boroughs go? And as you can see, we've put some suggested disposal points where we think people to go to, and that is based on just where we think geographically you know, Cannock would go to Poplars because it's right on its doorstep, so not trying to make them travel too far away. And that's all to do. Where we'll direct to is a conversation, but as nobody's actually, none of the 6 are actually collecting food waste at the moment, and I don't know if anybody's got actual concrete plans to start. It's kind of a moot point as to how much would put effort into identifying that, but it's more to give the partners a reassurance that it's there, and we're happy to have those conversations. So really looking at the next steps, we are waiting for clarity over the resources and waste strategy and to find out what's happening with food waste. We have had a meeting, it was last Tuesday, I think, where all the officers met and we sort of went through the slides. My team went through the information we've gone through today and highlighted where we are. And SCC, the county, are happy to have a conversation with any district board that's looking to go for food waste to determine if there's a better option. And see whether or not there is a better way we can do it. But we have got quite a few off-takers now in the area, so we have got quite a good solution in place as it stands. And until we can get that until we can start having those conversations and understand what it is district boards would want, the general expectation for the county is that if food waste is collected separately, it would be directed into one of those off-takers that we've already got contracted for at the moment.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Andrew. I think since this presentation went out with the agenda pack, there's been obviously national moves in various directions, I'm not quite sure which. But what I would say is, as we found out with planning, you know, the housing figure target, which was floated to be removed, hasn't been removed and is still in place. So I think we need to make plans for this as part of our own waste strategy when we refresh it. And of course, Newcastle has been doing this for a number of years. And of course, I know Tim is working very closely with Andrew on as we've seen in the slide pack there, a way of this being, you know, driven out across the county if required and when required. But opening up to any sort of comments, Staffordshire Moorlands, Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's a lot of questions you could ask about this, to be honest. I mean, first of all, I applaud what Newcastle and the Lyme Borough Council have done. I mean, fantastic, to be honest. But the first question is that you say you're gaining £80,000. That's not a net £80,000. That's £80,000 which you are offsetting the £336,000 with. So it's still costing you about £250,000 to operate this scheme, and your population's around 140,000, something like that. I'm just scaling it to Staffordshire Moorlands and things. Which leads me on to the next thing, and that is obviously the carbon footprint of collecting. I know moving to electric vehicles and things, but I know Newcastle's got quite a tight core, but it has obviously got, you know, loggerheads and Mere and places like that. Is that part of is your 30% aimed on collecting in the core, or are you offering that service around the broader district?
It's a good question. No, it's offered to every household. The only households that we don't collect from at the moment is flats. So there's around about 2,500 apartments and flats that we don't collect. We've got a couple of pilots, but as again, rather selfishly, we've not put that service in because of the promise of new burdens. Funding from government would allow us to. We're probably going to need another vehicle, to be perfectly honest. So we didn't want to necessarily jump the gun again and take those costs on when new burdens funding was being dangled. So that's roughly where we're at the moment. I think your question is really valid around actually having separate vehicles, and we've tried numerous different solutions, to be honest, in the sort of 13 years. So I think when we first started, we had a combination of pods on recycling vehicles and then 4 separate vehicels, doing them on the residual. We then went to a system where food waste was collected with all the dry recycling. So it was a Welsh model. That, to be perfectly honest, was a disaster to operate. It was not a good system at all. So we've gone very much back to getting it as simple as possible. So we now run completely separate vehicles, and actually the number of vehicles that we've got over the recycling and food waste service is actually still slightly less than we had with the Welsh model that we had before, so that there's been some slight improvement with that. In terms of electric vehicles, yes, the food waste vehicles, I'll have to look at Steve because he probably knows more about the market than I do. There's none on the market as far as I'm aware at the moment, but that type of chassis is probably becoming more prevalent. So that certainly will be an option. I would have thought a more usable option than maybe the bigger RCVs that we use sort of going forward. So certainly when we come to change ours in the next 3 to 4 years, hopefully there will be an electric solution there. If that helps.
Yes, thank you. I'm rather hoping that some of the points I raise are collective points which other people are interested in, so not just me. But yeah, you say your collection rate is 30%. Is that, do people actually subscribe to it so you know where you're going, or do you just patrol around hoping that you see a little bit somewhere?
The way we do it actually is we could have paid consultants huge amounts of money to go around and counting food caddies, but we obviously utilise an in-cab system that actually has got a facility that you can log when people don't put the bins out, so that then if they try to sort of say later on, oh, you've missed my collection, actually it's registered, well, you didn't put it out. We actually use that facility in reverse to actually count the number that are out in terms of food caddies. And it stays around about, it started off, I think the first survey we did, it was around about 31%. We set ourselves a target of 35, which we've managed to sort of get to. But it gets incrementally more difficult because effectively what we've got is the people who want to do it, who see the benefits. We've now got to get to the next stage of people, in all honesty, because sadly it's looked at as being a bit messy, a little bit, you know, we don't want the food, you know, all of that type of thing. So we've got to overcome those difficulties, really.
Thank you. I think just to come in there, obviously, as a Newcastle resident, and somebody sitting next to me is a Newcastle resident as well, those people that use it, I think, have got used to using it and found it is a good service. And I think what we've suffered from is the fact that it's not being advertised nationally or anything like that. I think when the government of whatever shade go down the route of bringing in the mandatory collections, it will be a bigger issue and it will be more high profile. I think we'll get more collections. And I always find, I think this separate collection will be a lot better. I don't live in Staffordshire Moorlands, but of putting it in your garden waste, it's like, oh, that's a bit messy, isn't it? But again, I think the separate food caddy with a bag in there as well, which keeps it in the biodegradable bag, is a good way forward. But we'll come back to Nigel, and then we'll move on then, because we've still got some more business to do.
Yes, and the final thing is, in some respects, you're looking to do a brand new service for what is hopefully a diminishing quantity, because what we really don't want is collect any food waste, because there's no waste at all. So in that context, the commercial side becomes important. I know you made the comment about schools, but that brings you on to hospitals, care homes, sheltered housing type thing, supermarket waste and restaurants. And do you think there's scope for Newcastle Council and the wider councils to get involved on that level, or is that treading on the toes of commercial operators?
Not really. Certainly, in terms of supermarkets, those sort of supply chains are already catered for. So most of the anaerobic digestion companies are actually, the majority of their food stock is supermarket waste. And actually, if ever you get the chance to visit one and see the sheer amount that comes in from the likes of Sainsbury's and so on, it's frightening. They just clear the shelves. I can remember, I know we're short of time, but I can remember going to an AD plant just after Mother's Day, and it wasn't just food waste. It was effectively flowers, you name it, chocolates, because they were packaged in Father's Day or Mother's Day packaging. Didn't matter whether the stuff was actually still okay. It was just clear them off the shelves and get rid of it. And I find that actually quite criminal, really. And those habits are very, and we're all paying for that at the end of the day. And for me, that's something that I think needs to be tackled nationally as well. So yeah, I don't think as local authorities we'd break into the supermarket side, but certainly restaurants, pubs, that side of things, absolutely. They don't have any real outlet. Even the big waste management companies are not actively collecting that material. So there is a unique opportunity for us, for sure.
Thank you for that, Andrew. And I think fascinating area, isn't it? And just a glimpse into, you know, a council that's already started a service that may be the type of service that is mandated by central government. I think you're quite right. There's plenty of scope to increase the amount of food waste collected, but ultimately we want to see that decrease at the end with more use. I think that's a really important message you put up there about the waste of food. And as you said, the supermarket, so it's a criminal, isn't it, almost? I think something for the Climate Commission to look into, I think, Zoe, isn't it, as well? If we can get some supermarket representation around the table and find a different way of doing that as well would be really important. Thank you, Nigel, particularly for your comments on there. We'll move on then to item 6, which is a performance update. And as I said at the beginning item, we regularly monitor our performance, and we do that in our sustainability pledges and also in our waste agenda. I'm going to ask James Cartwright, who's the County Council Officer, to update us on the sustainability performance. And then I'm going to ask Rachel from South Staffs to update us on the waste. But over to you first, James, and I'll put there on the screen.
Thank you, Chair. Just mindful on time, so I'll try and skim a stone across the pond of reporting here. So happily, I'm presented with a veritable sea of green, just looking across on our pledges. But I'd just like to highlight a few things which are just flagged amber or red. First one's in Pledge 1, the baseline reporting, all done terribly well, which, as the Chair indicated earlier, is really important. Only Tamworth falling slightly behind. They're flagged red at the moment because they haven't completed their reporting. But we have been in touch with them as County Council, and they're just recruiting to a post at the moment. So I'm hopeful that will change in the very near term. Also, carbon literacy training. A lot of hard work has been put in over the past 12 months. There are a few bits of catch-up, including within the County Council. I do know a lot of effort is being put up in September, catching those officers and members that just haven't had a chance to complete that training to date. And then as far as green energy, today we're bathed in green energy from these light bulbs ahead, independently certified by REGO certificates, tying into the renewable energy generation that is powering us today. Happily to report that 60% of the councils are now on similar tariffs, and from the presentation slide earlier on East Staffs, they're going to join the club in October, with the other 2 remaining councils reviewing their green energy as they come out of contract from their existing suppliers. Also just like to, I think, just communicate to the board on achievements over the past 12 months. I was lucky enough to be at the Climate Expo at Kiel last week, chatting to a lot of people from a lot of different organisations and really celebrating what we've achieved as a board in this short time. My discussions, these isn't exclusive, but certainly give you a flavour, is the Staffordshire EV strategy and looking at how we can deliver EV charge points to people who don't have driveways to facilitate their access to EV cars. Also, the Staffordshire adaptation strategy, which has now gone through all of our cabinets, looking at how we, as councils, adapt to climate change and support our residents with the services that we deliver to them. And then I think Lily has put quite eloquently, and more so than I could, on the joint communications campaign and the successes that has delivered over the past 12 months. And I think really the real positivity that it's generated, not only with our residents, but with the businesses alike. It's clearly a very passionate field that people feel close to their hearts. And I look forward to another productive 12 months.
Thank you, James. And then our waste performance, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of data in your agenda packs. I'm not going to bore you by going through it line by line, you'll be pleased to know. But I just want to highlight a few key trends that you can see in that data. So we've got 3 years of data in there. You can see there's a continued decline in the volume of residual waste we're collecting per household, which is a good thing. There's a continued decline in the overall recycling rate for the Staffordshire Waste Partnership. Nothing to be overly alarmed about in the context of the national picture. That data set isn't in your pack. But our average recycling rate is around that 42% mark, as is the national recycling rate. We've got a few factors that are going on that are potentially influencing the volumes of waste and recycling that we're seeing. For example, cost of living pressures, which impacts on consumer habits, which means less waste in general, whether that waste is recyclable or not. We've got growing season changes impacting on the amount of garden waste that's being collected. Again, climate change will be having an impact on that. And we've got producer responsibility impacts as well. You might have noticed Amazon, to an extent, have stopped putting boxes inside of boxes inside of boxes. So we're seeing a reduction in packaging coming through the recycling streams as well. If you look at some of the graphs you've got in your agenda pack as well, you'll see that there is some recycling comparisons between the district borough councils as well as the county council and city council. There are local variations in that data because of service differences, for example, Newcastle having separate food waste and Staffordshire collecting food and garden waste commingled. And also socio-demographic influences on the performance of those services as well. You can also see that there's a seasonal pattern to the recycling rates as well, strongly influenced by garden waste tonnages collected. The residual waste also has a strong seasonal trend. Notably at Christmas, we get a massive increase in residual waste collected also. And just to reference again, I think one of the other slides has got a couple of more stable lines on it. It might be the next slide, which compares... No, that's the only one we've got. In your pack then, there is one that's got the PFI target, which is the the Staffordshire Waste Partnership recycling target, and the national target, which is 65% marked on it. You can see that there's a little squiggly line underneath, which is the Staffordshire Waste Partnership recycling rate, which is below that. What isn't on that is that national trend, which would track a lot more closely to Staffordshire's own recycling rate. But obviously, there's some way to go to that national target. And again, I think it's been raised a number of times already in the meeting that national direction on how we're going to get there is very much needed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. I think two things from me on that one. I think when we look at that one that's on the screen at the moment, we've been through one of the biggest upsets since the Second World War. Right in the middle of there, at the beginning of there, was the pandemic, which we know we were restricting collections, cancelling collections, and going to longer periods for collections. And that will take a while, I think, to settle down. We've got to almost re-educate some people back into recycling because they've gotten out of the routine of it. But I think what you just finished with there, Rachel, that new waste strategy that we're working on in Staffordshire has really got to focus on getting those recycling rates up across the board. So I think we can look forward to that coming in the future, and more of that later in our private meeting. But I think we will bring this meeting to a close now. Thank you for particularly the public, if they've been watching or watch later on this. This will be available on the County Council's website. Also, thank you to the local democracy reporter from the Sentinels who's sitting in the corner there throughout, reporting on this meeting as well. But we will now move to the exclusion of the public for the reasons as set out in the agenda as part of the Local Government Act, Part 1, Schedule 12A. Do we all agree that? Agreed? Thank you.